Do you remember back in the good old days when small cars were also cheap cars? Well, this is the Toyota Yaris Cross, and yeah, it's small, but it ain't cheap. But it is a hybrid, which means not only will you help save the planet, but you'll also save a fortune in rising fuel costs. Well, that's Toyota's marketing pitch anyway, which is why, along with my corgi Poppy, I've spent the past 3 months putting that theory to the test, as well as exploring every other part of this tiny Toyota. I'll tell you everything I loved, everything I didn't, and I'll even answer the big question, which is, should you get this one or wait for the bigger Corolla Cross? So if you're in the market for a small SUV, stay with me, because this one gets interesting. Now, my ride for the past 3 months has been the Yaris Cross Urban all-wheel drive, which sits atop the model tree above the GXL and GX, and will set you back a considerable $37,990 before on-road costs. Drive away, you're looking at more like $42K. Yes, it is the most expensive model, but the truth is, entry to any model in the Yaris Cross hybrid range will mean you have to find more than $30K to put one on the road. In this brave new world of car availability, or lack of it, things are expensive right across the manufacturer board. But for those of us old enough to remember when small cars were also cheap cars, it is a bit of a price shock. Now, to be fair, the entire Yaris Cross hybrid range is pretty well equipped. All models get things like alloy wheels, keyless entry and start, a leather accented steering wheel, single zone climate, a digital instrument cluster, a 7-inch multimedia touchscreen, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and a 6-speaker audio system. Spring for the GXL and you'll find LED headlights and navigation, while our Urban builds on all of that further with 18-inch alloys, very good heated front seats, and an additional fast charge USB port, as well as a head-up display and an auto opening boot. It's a funky looking little thing, right? More a high riding hatch than anything even resembling a proper SUV, but I reckon Toyota's done a pretty good job with the design here, especially in this two-tone paint arrangement and with the big 18-inch alloy wheels. Now, it's a little snub-nosed looking at the front maybe, but in this Urban, guys, you do get the good LED headlights, and the extra 20mm in ground clearance you get over the regular Yaris is highlighted with these black cladded wheel arches. So small, but pretty well formed. But things do get interesting inside. Toyota has definitely gone for a more interesting feeling cabin experience here with lots of different colours and materials, and visually I think it works really well, even if some of the plastics aren't the most luxurious in the business. Elsewhere though, the big screen and the aircon controls are right in front of you. They're really easy to use, and some of the key driving functions like adaptive cruise control are activated via the steering wheel buttons, and they're pretty simple to get your head around as well. I will say this though, it doesn't feel like the hardest wearing cabin in the business. We've only had the car 3 months, and I don't think I'm overly hard on vehicles, and already some little scratches have started appearing in some of the plastics and in the door panels. Now, I'll take you to the back seat when we start talking practicality too, but be warned, there's a little sparse back there for a car that costs in excess of $40,000. So, first things first, the Yaris Cross Hybrid is, well, small. And yes, that part's probably obvious just by looking at it, but it really is diminutive in dimensions too. We're talking 4180mm in length, 1765mm in width, and 1590mm in height here, which means, as you've no doubt guessed, life is better in the front seats than it is in the back. The Yaris Cross is one of those cars that you can definitely fit adults in the back seat. It's just not necessarily something you'd like to do to them for longer journeys. I'm sitting behind my own 175cm driving position, and as you can see, I've got enough knee room and enough headroom, but it just feels a little closed in back here. Elsewhere though, it is a fairly sparse experience for backseat riders. There's no air vents, for example, no power outlets or USB connections. In fact, there's just the 2 cup holders in the pull down divider, and opening it gives you direct access to the boot, which is a little bit weird. Those cup holders though join the 2 up front for front seat riders, where you'll also find 2 USB connection points, only one of which will give you access to Apple CarPlay, and there's bottle holders in each of the doors, as well as ISOFIX attachment points in each window seat in the back. Now, boot space in the Yaris Cross is surprisingly not too bad. Sometimes it feels like my wife has bought every pillow that's ever been made by man, and when we go on a road trip, she insists on bringing them all with us, as well as our bags and gear and anything else we need. And at first, I thought this would be too small, but provided you kind of pack it Tetris style, you can definitely make it work. Now, open the boot, and you'll find 314 litres of luggage space on offer, as well as a small corgi, and that's about average for the segment. It's less space than you'll find in something like a Hyundai Venue, for example, but more than you'll find in a Mazda CX-3. The Yaris Cross Hybrid pairs a tiny 3-cylinder 1.5 litre petrol engine with its electric power to make a combined 85 kilowatts, then sends that power through an occasionally quite loud CVT transmission, and in this instance onto all four wheels, as this is the all-wheel drive. So fuel use has been one of the things I've been really impressed by in the Yaris Cross Hybrid. So over about my first 4 weeks of driving, I was getting 5.3 litres per 100 kilometres, and to be honest, I was pretty happy with that. But as I spent more time in the car and started mixing in a few longer distance trips, that number fell by almost half a litre per 100 kilometres to 4.9 litres. And I reckon that's really good. Sure, it's above Toyota's official claim, but to be honest, in real world testing, I was happy with that figure, especially given how expensive fuel prices have been. Which brings me to the next benefit. The Yaris Cross Hybrid is only fitted with a 36 litre tank, so even when fuel prices were at their most expensive, it didn't feel like I was breaking the bank to fill it up. And when I did, and based on that roughly 5 litres per 100 kilometres number, I could get around 700 kilometres in range out of every tank. Welcome then to the driver's seat of the Toyota Yaris Cross Hybrid, a car that does a lot of things really well and some not so well. Now I've started on this street for a reason, because it's a bit pockmarked, there's a few speed bumps, and I just want to show you what it's like on uncertain roads. It just can feel a little bit crashy. That general sense of cabin refinement isn't quite there. It may not be a cheap small car, but it still drives a little bit like one sometimes, and I just expect a slightly more peaceful cabin experience in a car that costs more than $40,000. Now the other thing that can start to grate on your nerves a little bit is that CVT. Now in the city, this thing definitely does its absolute best work. You can barely hear the transmission going about its business unless you really plant your foot. And in that sense, you can kind of just forget that it's there. But when you leave the city, you can find yourself going on, let's say you're on a freeway, for example, and going up a long hill, you can find yourself in a position where you're accelerating quite hard for quite a long time, and you can really hear the drone of that transmission at about that volume almost constantly. And that does get a little bit annoying. Now the other interesting thing about this car is it doesn't actually feel underpowered. It's got this tiny 3-cylinder engine, all up it makes about 85 kilowatts, but actually that's enough to get a car this size up and moving. And I've taken it way out of the city on freeways and the like, and I've never felt woefully underpowered at any time. What I would say though is while it doesn't feel underpowered, it sometimes sounds it, and I'll show you what I mean. So if you plant your right foot, there's plenty of take up in the car, there's no issue there, but it really sounds like the gearbox is working hard. It's this kind of strange quirk where it doesn't feel it, but it sounds it. It's kind of weird. So those are the things that I could do without in this car, but there's still a lot that I really like about it. You do feel connected to the drive experience, which I'm always a big fan of. The steering isn't vague, it's quite direct, it's quite confidence inspiring. The ride, sure, is a little firm and a little harsh, but it does make you feel like you're a part of the drive experience, which is a refreshing change, especially if you should find yourself going around corners or something like that. So it is a car that you can squeeze a little bit of driver's fun out of. The trade-off for that though is this sort of lack of cabin refinement, which can be a little bit annoying at times. But let's say you don't drive quite as enthusiastically as I drive, then perhaps some of these little quirks won't bother you as much as they bothered me. And in fact, if you're really gentle with the inputs, it is a pretty cruisy drive experience and one that delivers really good fuel efficiency. Right, so we're talking a 5-star ANCAP safety rating and new center airbags which deploy between the front seats, helping prevent head clashes between driver and passenger. In fact, the Yaris was one of the first small cars in Australia to offer them. That and a whole bunch of high-tech safety stuff means you can tick the box on this one.
The Yaris Cross comes with a 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty, and hybrid variants come with 10 years of hybrid battery cover. It's also covered by 7 years of emergency roadside assist. Toyota offers cut price servicing for the first 5 years of ownership, and each service will cost $215. You'll need to take it to a dealership every 12 months or 15,000 kilometres.
It's not cheap, and there are definitely areas where it doesn't quite feel like a $40,000 car, but I got to say it is a predictably strong hybrid offering from a company that's really perfected the technology over the past couple of decades. And to be honest, I have really appreciated the fuel savings over the last couple of months, especially given the price of petrol at the moment. Now, should you get this one or wait for the Corolla Cross? Well, this car is perfect for my wife and I, 2 people and a very small dog. But if you're a growing family, I'm going to say this one's probably a little bit too small. If that's you, keep an eye out for the Corolla Cross, I reckon.